Thanks very much, Michael. I'd also like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land, the Kadajul people, and their elders past and present. Libby was saying before that the report, and as I read it myself, I sensed it was great to see some trends, but we've got a long way to go and the progress is slow. And in a sense, that's a little bit about how I feel at GHD, although as I share our story today, hopefully you'll see that we believe that there are some learnings that I hope will be helpful to you. I think an overarching premise in addressing the gender gap is, as Michael said before, about leadership. And it needs individual commitment as well as leadership, organisational commitment to make things happen. And I think while we might be preaching to the converted here today, it is great to see such a huge attendance at an event on this topic, and I think that's somewhat encouraging. And I also think that commitment from everyone as leaders needs some understanding, and I think as we share our stories, we build understanding, and by building understanding, it all helps us embark a little further along that journey. So today I'm going to share a little bit about GHD's journey, and our board has actually set the target of 40% female workforce by 2020. So, where did we start? As with many of you, our diversity and inclusion strategy so far has been a journey to essentially accelerate cultural change in both our company but also the industry in which we work. And although GHD was a really early adopter, I believe, of paid parental leave over a decade ago, we didn't really start seriously on our gender equality journey till around 3 years ago. And it's not a quick fix. It's actually about that cultural change and investment which takes time. But I'm pleased to say that we are starting to see some signs of progress. And so that's encouraging to see those positive, sustainable outcomes. To create a more gender diverse workforce, we had to do the housekeeping. And I think Michael spoke about this as well. It's important to get your policies and practices and guidelines right. That's almost a hygiene piece that is absolutely foundational to the journey. But then you have to follow it up with some of the soft initiatives. Things like effectively communicating the objectives and building an understanding within the organisation. Things like unconscious bias training, which is the sort of thing we embarked on, are important elements. But you need to create the environment to have a broader conversation in the workplace so that you build that understanding in the workplace. It's not just about training and equipping, it's about making it part of the way we talk about doing business. The other thing is that our diversity and inclusion strategy is now an integral part of our corporate strategy, our Australian strategy, and also the way we measure our operational KPIs. So we see on a quarterly basis diversity and inclusion KPIs inherently seen as part of the performance benchmarks in the business. It's not a set and forget initiative. We've recently undertaken a global consultation with a range of women in our organisation because although, as I said, we really started seriously on our gender equality journey 3 years ago, it's important to check in and be proactive in engaging with the community to make sure how are we going. And so when we undertook that consultation, the themes of flexibility, equality and opportunity was certainly very evident in the feedback that we received, right from our female graduates all the way through to our senior executive women. And of those three, I think opportunity is the key, with flexibility and equality being enablers to help facilitate that opportunity. As a result of that consultation, the things that came out of it in terms of looking at creating opportunity, particularly from our women, were the importance of giving our women the opportunity in frontline operational roles and getting them experience. If you don't actually equip people to take on those senior executive roles and include everyone in that opportunity, then your capacity to progress is limited. We've also been very focused at GHD in building gender diversity in our leadership capability from within. The temptation to do a quick fix and recruit to bolster the numbers is always going to be there. But we believe that it's more important for us, if we're going to have a sustainable culture that's going to go forward in a positive way and continually build, that we invest the effort in our existing women and build that culture from within. And as a result, we're starting to see some encouraging signs of women in our business currently putting their hands up for leadership roles and expressing interest where we haven't seen that before. In the past 12 months particularly, or a little bit longer, we've also made sure we've had gender diverse shortlists for our leadership positions. And my personal view is that that's probably one of the key factors in the traction that we're starting to see in terms of the progress we're making in the business. In the Australian leadership team, my team, for example, we've actually seen the number of women double to almost 40% in the last 6 months. And I can see the difference in the dynamic and the approach that's bringing to the team, which is really great to see, and the different dynamic and environment, I'm sure, is contributing to a much more positive future for the firm. In our overall workforce in Australia, we have seen our female new starters increase to around 40% through a much more dedicated effort to remove that unconscious bias in our recruitment and, as I mentioned before, to have those gender diverse shortlists. The other enabler is flexibility. We do regular surveys of our people, and in our people survey this year, we asked an unprompted free-form question, and the question was, what is the best thing about working at GHD? Pretty standard stuff, and I'm sure you've all seen that in your internal people surveys or similar. What was really pleasing this year, that unprompted, working flexibly actually made it into the top 3 responses to that question. And to me, that was a really encouraging sign that we're starting to see the emergence of some of that cultural change that can really make a difference. Building a culture of flexible work for men, sorry, I'm one slide behind, my apologies, for men is also particularly important in terms of addressing the gender gap. And as Michael was saying before, it's really important to lead from the top. And like Michael, I've made the effort to overtly work flexibly. Working from home, on average, at least 1 day a week is something that I've done. And the impact of that, I've noticed. People talk about it, and it does make a difference. And I say overtly because people need to know you're doing it. It's no point doing it without people being aware. And that creates a level of acceptance. The other thing is, I think it's really important for men generally to actually adopt those flexible work practices. And that's why in the stories we have about working flexibly across our business, we include probably a greater proportion of stories regarding men working flexibly than we do about women working flexibly, because ultimately that will underpin the cultural change that we're trying to achieve. I think other flexibility enablers that are really important are making sure that your technology and your capacity to facilitate flexible work are working and are effective, so that there's no barriers to that flexible working. And the other thing we've found particularly useful is our managers who need to embrace that flexible working need to be trained. Like any cultural change, there are multiple elements, and training is part of that cultural change. And we've found that it's an important thing to bring our middle managers particularly into training sessions, which also creates a forum where they can feel free to discuss some of the issues and challenges that they need to maybe address in terms of that change. So equality in our approach to creating opportunity is paramount. As a pay equity ambassador, I strongly endorse the initiatives that business in general, but everyone is undertaking to try and close that gender gap and ensure that women and men who do similar work are paid equally. At GHD, we found that people who work part-time or had been on parental leave, when we did our gender pay analysis, had dropped behind others. This is when we first did this 2 or 3 years ago. And so, having addressed that, I've taken it on myself to every year participate in the annual gender pay equity review to ensure that we don't actually slip back into maybe some of those unconscious biases or maybe some of those decisions that have led to creating that gender pay gap that we identified when we did that analysis. We've also done other things like making sure that our income protection that we provide as part of our remuneration package continues through paid and unpaid parental leave so that people don't miss out during that period. Superannuation continues to be paid during parental leave periods and while people are on parental leave. And being an employee-owned company, we also heard from our women that they would like to have better understanding and greater access to our employee share scheme, which perhaps before they weren't feeling they were getting the same opportunity to get exposure to. So we're trying to actively encourage that. And through doing that, trying to make sure that equity is not just in salary, but the broad package of remuneration arrangements so that we can help women achieve financial security to the same level that we see for our male colleagues. Another area where I believe we can consider how we can achieve equality is by considering our physical work environments. The old office environments, particularly when we had more offices, were very much hierarchical, which was generated, I guess, and came out of that male-dominated era and the male system that effectively we're working to evolve. And so I believe that there's actually probably some good work to be done as we're moving into more flexible work environments, not only to think about those in terms of process need or team need, but to think about how the work environment we're creating can actually contribute to creating a generally more, an environment of greater gender equality in the way we organise our workplaces. So, there's no silver bullet. Every organisation needs a portfolio of responses to address this challenge. However, I believe the fundamental elements are about creating the right environment, building awareness, and most importantly, leadership by example. And I'm pleased to say that this slide is actually somewhat out of date. As I mentioned before, I've now got 5 women in my Australian leadership team and not 2. And I feel sure that those changes would not have evolved and be accepted and acknowledged as wise appointments by my team in Australia if we hadn't been following this journey of building up the cultural change necessary to see us look at gender equality in a different way. Thanks very much for the opportunity to share a little bit about GHD's story. I know you've all got your own stories to tell, and I hope by sharing a little bit of ours that you might actually be able to take away some ideas for this important initiative in terms of creating gender equality. It's not just about a sector, it's not just about a firm, it's about our society. And I think it's exciting to see us embarking on that journey, and I look forward to us getting greater traction to hopefully see within my lifetime, in not 170 years, some real change. Thanks very much.